Major Krauser? Why? You can't save her. Ahead! You're kidding.
Resident Evil 4, the remake. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on the original, which I have talked about in numerous videos. Those of you who've been on the channel for a while, you know, I loved the original. It was probably the Resident Evil game that I played the most. Like, I played it the most times over. Even though it's not my favourite, and it was the game that shifted Resident Evil into a new direction that focused a lot more on action games and stuff like that. And at that time, I wasn't the biggest fan of that directional shift when we saw games like Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6, which I'm not a massive fan of. But Resident Evil 4 was an amazing game, and I was very excited to see Resident Evil 4 Remake. I was very excited to see a bit more of a tonal shift into something that's a bit more scarier, because I didn't think the original was that scary. I was coining sort of 3 particular moments where the game actually terrified me. It was the Regenerators, the Verdugo, and I can never remember the name of that boss with the massive mouth and the long body and the tail, and you're in like that saw maze that's sort of hanging from a cliffside. That one. Those three moments in particular for me were the scariest parts of the original, and there wasn't really much else. That the atmosphere of Resident Evil games is what I love so much. And so playing through Resident Evil 4 Remake, I was so glad to see that it very much shifted into a scarier atmosphere than what we had in the original. I thought, obviously, I knew the game would, because we've seen the other remakes. The game looked graphically, it looked brilliant. I tend to play them in much lower settings, just so the game would run well on my crappy computer. But it ran well, everything was fine. I did have some audio glitches in some of the boss battles and the end of the game, which was kind of frustrating. There was nothing I could do about it. I tried, and there were just basically the music cut out, so you could still hear the in-game sound effects, but you didn't hear the music. Other than that, I didn't have any sort of optimization issues or anything like that. Moving on to the characters. Now, I'm just going to go through them one by one, because I've actually wrote some notes for this one, guys, so don't worry. I thought starting off with Ashley, I thought she was so much improved from the original. I'm definitely in the camp. Ashley was very annoying, I found, in the original. Trying to protect her in the original felt more like a chore a lot of the time. Whereas this time, it didn't really feel so much of like an annoying burden. And I'm not too sure why. I don't know if it was the sort of change in the the voice actor or the character themselves, because there's still the same two things where you tell her to wait or you tell her to come with you or like stick close to you. So those factors hadn't changed in terms of the gameplay. So I'm not sure why I felt like it, but she didn't feel like she was an inconvenience compared to the original. Her personality was so much better in this game, I thought. In particular, her section where you have to play as her, I thought was really good. I found that particular part of the game very scary, given their giant suits of armor. You know, you could pass that off as being something that's quite comical. I found that part actually really scary, because obviously she doesn't have any weapons. She's got the torches and that, but you couldn't really, as far as I'm aware, you couldn't really fight back. You couldn't even throw the lamps. I might be wrong, because I know that the blue flame is what can hurt them, and there were blue flames on the wall which I did nothing with. So maybe I could have used them. Let me know. But yeah, I really liked Ashley overall. She was very good. I thought the script writing for her and how she interacted with Leon was a lot better this time as well. I will compare that, however, to Ada and Leon. Now, for some reason, I feel like it was the script, or I didn't think it had anything to do with Ada's voice actor, for the record, which I thought was fine. Don't get me wrong, it was a lot different from the Resident Evil 2 remake Ada, but didn't have a problem with it. I thought that Ada and Leon, their interactions and their chemistry was lacking so much in this game compared to the original and the Resident Evil 2 remake, and I'm not too sure why. Especially in that first scene where Leon gets the knife to her throat and stuff like that. I didn't feel any chemistry between the two characters, and that's, you know, that's a large part of their interactions, is their chemistry, because they clearly like each other, but they're sort of going in two different directions in their lives. I do want to say it was just some of the script, some of the lines that Ada had specifically, I thought really didn't help. Leon's was okay for the most part, but I think it could have been a little better. In general, they did drop a lot of the puns from the game, which was sort of a staple with the cheesy aspect of the original. It's sort of one of the themes, which was another part that made the original so fun. But it made sense for them to drop the cheesiness and stuff from the remake, because they are going for the more darker tone, which sort of suits the remake universe, in my opinion. And it was obviously, as I said again, something that I really wanted to see, that darker tone. So you do lose some stuff. But in terms of Leon as a character, his progression from the sort of bright-eyed rookie cop persona that he had in Resident Evil 2, it was really evident to see. You could really tell, especially from the way they did the intro and that. And yeah, I thought that his demeanor and stuff, it perfectly sort of encapsulates how Leon is compared to how he was in Resident Evil 2. Like, they did it just right. Like, he is sort of traumatized by what happened in Raccoon City, and that's sort of his main driving force from the beginning, is his whole thing of this time it's going to be different. You know, he says it at the start, or he thinks it at the start in the intro, and then he says it right at the end. So that need for Leon to succeed, and for the person that he's trying to save to actually be saved. So I think the intro done a really good job of sort of exploring sort of the loss and the stuff that he's seen. So it reflected Kendo, Marvin, and of course Ada, who he thinks died. And in his mind, for all that time, he failed them. He failed those people because he couldn't save them. And so obviously coming out there to get Ashley, he needed this time to be different. And as I say, I thought that was done very well. He plays his action man role well, albeit it's not too much of a change from the original. As I said before, like, aside from like less puns and stuff, it does mean that his banter and interactions with Salazar was a lot less enjoyable and less interesting than in the original. But again, for the tonal shift, it does kind of make sense, in my opinion. But I must admit, obviously, I loved the original Salazar. I loved the voice actor for the original Salazar, and I just think, again, it depends on sort of how you want to see the game. If you want the more light-hearted, fun side of things, rather than focusing on what is essentially the situation and the darker tone of exactly what's going on, like, it doesn't make sense for Salazar to be exactly as he was in the original. It doesn't quite make sense. But still, I think they could have kept some of the lines that Leon and Salazar had from the original, but, you know, it is what it is. The gameplay itself was brilliant, as always, with the Resident Evil engine and the new remakes that they keep putting out, and they put out each one with sort of a different gameplay mechanic. So with Resident Evil 2, you had the counters. With Resident Evil 3, you had sort of the dodges, and Resident Evil 4, you had the parry mechanic. And initially, I kind of hated the knife durability. Like, I didn't mind the parrying, but the knife durability really bothered me early on. But, you know, as time grew on, as I built up the knife's durability, like, it just made so much sense to have that. And I thought it worked really well for the game. I thought the parrying was really good, but having the durability in there, like, it had to happen, because you could essentially just cheese the game, because you could parry like bosses, you could parry almost anything. So for you to not always have a knife, or for it to run out in the middle of combat, is definitely something that made the parrying sort of worthwhile and not too cheesy, you know. But as I say, like the gameplay was great, you know. Capcom have sort of nailed this Resident Evil engine, the over the shoulder, and the range of sort of different weapons and stuff. We had all the stuff from the original and some new stuff, which was good to see. I've got to talk about ammo scarcity in this game, because one thing about the original, and this might be just my memory because I haven't played it like that recently, but I always found myself with like too much ammo. Like I was very good at keeping my ammo in the original, and it got to a certain point, I think towards the end of the village, or maybe it was even midway through the village, I always had plenty of ammo. Like I had no concerns about getting ammo whatsoever. Whereas in the remake, I was regularly running out of ammo. Like genuinely found it, and this is on standard mode, guys. This isn't hardcore or professional or whatever. Like you guys, I'm sure, all doing in professional mode. I found keeping ammo like quite difficult, and I was really focusing on building up the durability of the knife so I could use the knife as much as possible to conserve ammo. And even then, that didn't really help me. I found myself using up the gunpowder and stuff so quickly and using up the ammo so quickly. I just regularly, I would find myself not out of ammo a lot of the time, but just very low. And there were a few times on the island when I did literally run out of ammo, and I sort of had nothing to work with, which I thought was much better, because you don't ever want to have too much ammo, because then the game's too easy. So I thought they'd done ammo scarcity like 100 times better in the original for sure. I do want to talk really quickly about the so they took out QuickTime events, which I was actually like, I'm a big fan of QuickTime events, and I think they would work really well in all of the remakes personally, especially Resident Evil 3. I think QuickTime events would have been great for the Nemesis and stuff like that. And they took them out of Resident Evil 4. Okay, that's fine, because the parrying mechanic almost kind of acts like QuickTime events, especially in the knife battle with Krauser, which was much improved. Like I loved Krauser in the original. I loved his voice actor. I loved the character. I loved the boss battle, which I thought was really cool. They amped it up in the remake, and I found it much scarier. I found like when you're going through that certain area and it's sort of dark and stuff, and I'm not sure sort of where I'm going. Like even that area I found like creepy and just sort of very unnerving. And again, they've done really well to create a creepy and unnerving atmosphere that I just didn't find. I didn't have that in the original. It was very, I don't know what the word is, like it was good, but it wasn't scary. You know, it was just what it was. It was standard. I don't know. But he was another boss that I did find surprisingly easy to beat in the end. But again, I don't know if that's because I've played the original. I sort of know to an extent how it works. So people who haven't played the original might feel differently to what I think about some of the bosses and find them a bit too easy. But again, played it on standard mode, so it was good to see additional lore building, which I knew was going to happen, you know, new notes and stuff like that. I wasn't sure if Luis was a scientist in the original. I honestly just can't remember. And initially it's sort of kind of hard to believe, but you can kind of see it, you know, it's fine. You know, it works for what they need to. And I do like how they linked Luis to Ada and Wesker. And again, I don't know if that was the case in the original and I just didn't pick up on the cues in the previous one, but obviously you got to see cutscenes between Luis and Ada and stuff, which I thought was really good. Just a couple more points on some of the enemies. There were some new enemies that were good additions, like the pig guys and stuff like that. Although that evade option that you sometimes get with some enemies and not others, I did find kind of annoying. Like it's almost like it just crops up sort of randomly almost. But hey, it is what it is. The Novistados, I found them, I wasn't even sure if they were going to be in the game. Like, I was sort of midway through the castle and I was like, are they even going to have them? And then obviously they did have the Novostados, and I like what they did with the sort of camouflage aspect, because in the original, the first set that you encounter in sort of the basement sort of sewer area were like, literally they had stealth camo. They were invisible, which I thought at the time that was really like, oh, that was very difficult to get through. But they nerfed these guys hard. Like, they were very easy to kill. They were like two decent bullet rounds with the handgun and they were down. I found them very, very straightforward, which surprised me about just how easy they were to take down. Again, maybe tougher in professional and hardcore. Let me know. The Verdugo boss fight, pretty much just like the original. He was very freaking scary. Just like before, you know, as I said before, he's basically Alien from Alien, and scary. And I because it was so similar to the original, I don't think I was as scared as I would have been, but like graphically, he was terrifying. But a good boss fight nonetheless. It took me a couple of goes to down him because I ran out of ammo. But we've got to talk about the regenerators, because they went hardcore with the regenerators, right? So I thought a number of times they were like, okay, they're not going to put them back in the game. And then, spoilers, there was that section where there were body bags, sort of what is essentially the prison area that you see in the original game. I will just finish by saying this. I really enjoyed the Resident Evil 4 remake, and I was honestly expecting to enjoy it more than the original, because of the stuff I said before about how I would prefer the original to be a bit more darker, and to have the atmosphere that the remake did, to have that darker tone, to focus a bit more on the atmosphere and the scares and stuff. And funny enough, the remake did all that, but it kind of made me appreciate what the original was. Like, it made me appreciate it more. And I think on balance, I think if I was to replay either of them, I would probably replay the original, which I find, even just saying it is strange in my head, because in my head, everything that I think I wanted from what the original Resident Evil 4 should have been was the Resident Evil 4 remake, if that makes sense. And so, like, logically, that's the one that I think I should like more. Bearing in mind, I've only played the remake once. I've only played it once and I just finished it, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. But I genuinely think that the original was so much fun. And again, I wouldn't be playing it because I'm trying to scare myself or for anything like that. But that was easily sort of the most fun Resident Evil game, the original Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 Remake was great. I really enjoyed it. Out of the remakes, I would say that it's the second best. I still don't think that there's anything beating the Resident Evil 2 Remake. It is way clear of Resident Evil 3 Remake. I like to think most people can agree on that in the truth. I really enjoyed it. It was a really, really good, fun remake. And initially, I think I had my expectations a bit higher for, if you were listening to the podcast the other week, about it potentially being in the Game of the Year competition. And well, it may well be, but it's pretty obvious who's going to win Game of the Year. I think we can all agree on that elephant in the room. Am I right? But yeah, a great game, great fun. I look forward to replaying the remake, but I definitely actually want to go back and replay the original, funny enough. But yeah, there we go, guys. There is my thoughts on the Resident Evil 4 remake. And again, I'll say this before, I really would like it if they remade Code Veronica before they did 5. I hope they do that. in the back of my mind, I've got some weird feeling that the team that worked on Resident Evil 3 remake will be the ones that work on Code Veronica, and then the ones that worked on Resident Evil 2 and 4, I'm only guessing that they're the same team, will work on 5. That's just in my head anyway. I'm pretty sure there's a different team that worked on Resident Evil 3. If that is the case, I feel like I read it somewhere. If that is the case, then I don't know, I feel like that showed a little in the remakes. Still a good remake, but just not on the same level as 2 or 4. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this video, and if you did, hit the like button for me. If you would like me to post my Let's Play, I can do that for you. I haven't been posting, they're just recording, so they're not, there's no reaction, so it's just gameplay. Didn't think it'd be worth posting on here. If you want to see some maybe cut up version of it, I don't know, let me know. Thank you guys again. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and of course I will see you guys in the next video.